So first, please subscribe our channel and like this video, press the bell icon, and make sure to join our WhatsApp and Telegram.
Hello friends, welcome back to our channel Bang on Theory. So guys, we are back with a new video that is on Linux. So in this video guys, we are going to discuss about the basic of Linux and the basic difference of Linux versus Windows and Linux versus Unix and many more. So in this video we are going to see many more things about Linux and the key points like why Linux or why Linux is a good operating system for developers and many more things we are going to discuss in this video. So here is why Linux is a good choice for OS for software developers. So Linux might be just the best operating system for software development, and let's take a quick look at the Linux has to offer and suggest some great Linux distributions. So in this video you are going to see various points as well. The first point is that what is Linux. So since you are actually reading these articles, chances you are already have an idea about Linux, like you are very well known about Linux and very familiar with Linux operating system. But yes, for the uninitiated, Linux is a type of an operating system just like Windows, iOS and Mac OS. So it is a very popular operating system. In fact, the Android operating system is built on the top of the Linux kernel. So you could say that the Linux kernel is the foundation on which Android is built. So basically, if you are an Android developer, so the Linux operating system is very much useful for you. But Linux is also powers many other internet and business server, including numerous stock exchange around the world. So it has been around since mid of 1919. So give or take, Linux is literally everywhere today. So it is widely considered one of the most reliable, stable and secure operating system. Suppose you are looking for an operating system in which you can see the reliability, stability and security as well. So Linux is the best option for you. So in fact, many software developers choose Linux as their preferred operating system for their project, because it is important, however, to point out that the term Linux only really applies to the core kernel of the operating system. So one of the most important aspect of Linux is that it is open source, means that the code used to create it is free and available to the public to view, edit and even contribute to its development. So Linux is similar to the other operating system you might be used to like Windows, Mac OS, etc. It comes with a graphical interface as even version of common software you are probably accustomed and to like word processors, photo editors, video editors, etc. many more. So but as the core piece of it are generally open source. Basically we get to know that it is an open source so that we can create or the code that we are creating and using that can be available to the public anywhere. We can use that. And is Linux good for developers? That is the most important question that we have. So as we have already touched upon above, so Linux is widely considered one of the best operating system around this. This is especially true for software programmers. Suppose you are a software programmer and developer, so Linux is the best option for you. Your choice of the operating system, as we described in a previous article, in previous video of Linux command. So we get to know that it depend on personal taste, software development environment needs, means in our previous video that is on Linux command. So we get to know that how effective that is when we use that command in Linux. So however, there is a vast rate of programmers who swear by the benefits. Basically it is about the benefit and the competitors of Linux. Some of the main reason programmers love Linux and why. So first is that you can't get any cheaper than free, means Linux being open source, it is free to download and install on your computer. So this make it great for software developer, whether they are hobbyist, student, aspiring programmer or a professional. They can use it because it is free to download and very well useful. And secondly, we have Linux is easy as pie to install. So usually If you have never built a computer from scratch, chances are you have never had to install an operating system yourself. Thankfully, installing Linux is a relatively straightforward. You don't need to be seasonal IT professional. Suppose you want to install Linux in your system, so you that task can be performed easily. There is no need to worry about that, and it is not that much different from installing a software program in Windows. Another benefit is that you can also keep any existing operating system. Means in a single computer you can operate multiple Windows. Single system you can operate multiple operating system like Windows and Linux together. And if you love to customize your stuff, Linux is for you. Suppose you are very much interested in code customization and many more customization, so Linux is the best ideal option for you. So Linux is an ideal operating system for those who love to tinker and customize. Fourth, that is Linux has great support for most programming language. Whenever you need to write C, C++, CSS, Java, JavaScript and many more programming languages, so Linux supports all of them. While you may have come across issues at time, in most cases you should have a smooth ride. So generally speaking, if a programming language is not limited to a specific operating system like Visual Basics for Windows, it should work on Linux. If you do run into support issues, you can usually get your hands on the required package from Linux distribution repositories. So fifth one is Linux has a ton of apps to choose from. So Linux has a lot of great supported apps that are handy for many programmers, that is specifically for programmers. So while you could just write your code using a simple text file, Linux is some very useful for you and time saving text editor to make your life a lot of easier. Means in that there are a lot of text editors, text saving applications that we can use, so it is very much useful for you. And learning to use Linux can land you a great job. Suppose you are very much well versed in Linux, so you can get a better job as well. So Linux is a great option if you simply live in a breathe programming, but most of us need to pay the bills too. So this is where learning is to use Linux can actually improve your employability in the market. Experience using Linux is a very desirable skill for many high paying position, and even if you have no real ambition to become a Linux legend, but having some basic functional knowledge of it will give you a competitive edge as a programmer. So what have you got to lose? Nothing. So is Linux hard to learn? That is the basic question. Many programmers and the user are thinking that Linux is hard to understand, to learn. So answer is very much clear, is that Linux, anything in life, just how easy or difficult something is, that the matter is that it determined by your personal experience, dedication and the willingness to learn. Suppose you are not that much willing, or you don't want to acquire new skills about any operating system, so you can't do it. But if you have a willingness to perform particular task and dedication among the tasks, so you can do it. Similarly, one of the best way to get the grip Linux is to develop some project using it. This will help accelerate your grasp of Linux. And which Linux distro is the best for software development? So we can see many more, like Debian comes highly rated. Debian distro is not only the most popular distribution around, but it also forms another operating system for many other Linux distros. So secondly, Ubuntu is very good too. If you are into web development, Python, etc., then Ubuntu is probably one of the best Linux distro for you. Thanks of the support from like Canonical and open source community, Ubuntu has also grown to become one of the shining light of the Linux ecosystem. And CENTOS is a great for Red Hat developers. Suppose you are a Red Hat developer, so CENTOS is a very useful Linux distro that you can use. And CENTOS and virtual platform also offer a way to compartmentalize your project and run applications safely inside a virtual machine. And POP operating system is all awesome for programmers. It is based on Ubuntu and also featured that very popular GNOME desktop environment that you will learn to love to, and it is a great window management system and some seamless switching between the integrated and dedicated graphics, and offer what many think in an unparalleled programming experience. So now we are come to our main point, that is the difference between Linux and Windows. So major difference are Linux is an open source operating system while the Windows are not open source operating system. Linux is free of cost and Windows is costly. Its file name case sensitive, and in the case of Windows, file case is not case sensitive, case insensitive. In Linux, monolithic kernel is used. In that Windows, there is a micro kernel is used. Linux is more efficient comparison of Windows, while Windows are less efficient. And there is a forward slash in use for separating the directories, while there is a backslash is used for separating the directories. Linux provides more security than Windows. So major term that we can see here, the security means in Linux we have security in more than Windows, and while it provides less security in Linux than Linux. So Linux is widely used in hacking purpose based system, and while Windows does not provide much efficiency in hacking. Suppose you are a hacker and you have interest in hacking, so you might be choose Linux for your purpose, and it is very helpful to you as well. And here are some key points that to be remembered. Linux versus Windows. Linux is an open source while Microsoft is a commercial operating system. Linux user can access the source code of the operating system and make amendments as per their whims and fancies, while the Windows user control cannot easily. Moderately powerful system, whereas the Windows operating system tend to become slow as time passes. Windows collect data to enhance the customer experience, while Linux doesn't. In the reliability quotient, Linux is more reliable than Windows. In gaming, Windows has upper hand by huge margin, as most developers create game for Windows only. Linux is a highly secure system, and bugs and vulnerabilities can be fixed easily due to its open source program. Over the past year, Linux has merged as the go-to system large business owners due to its features and applications. So now we are coming to the difference between Linux and Unix as well. So here is the key points are, that is, first one is development. So in Linux is an open source and developed by Linux community of developers. Similarly, Unix was developed by AT&T Bell Labs, and it is not an open source operating system. So cost, secondly is the cost. Then Linux is free to cost, and Unix is a licensed operating system. And the supported file system are ext2, ext3, ext4, JFS, RazorFS, XFS, BTRFS, and FAT32, NTFS, and here we have FS, GPFS, HFS, HFS Plus, UFS, XFS, ZFS. And then we have GUI. Linux use KDE and GNOME. Other GUI supported are LXGE, XFCE, Unity Mate, and Unix was initially a command-based operating system. Most of the Unix distribution have GNOME. Usage. Linux is used in the varieties from desktop, server, smartphone, mainframes, whereas Unix is mostly used on server, workstation, or PCs. Default shell, Bash-born again shell is a default shell for Linux, and Bourne shell is a default shell for Unix. And target processor, Linux was initially developed by Intel x86 hardware processor. Now it supports 20 plus processor families. C Unix supports PA, RISC, and Latinium family. And example: Ubuntu, Debian, GNU, Arch, Linux, etc. Sun operating system, Solaris, SCO, Unix, AIX, HP, UX, Ultrix, etc. are the example of Unix. So here is there is a point that you can see. So it support more file system, it support lesser than Linux, and it is an open source operating system which is freely accessible to everywhere. It is an operating system which can be only utilized by its copywriters. So the default interface is Bash. It is initially used Bourne shell as we can see in the previous tables, and anybody can use Linux where a home client developer or a student develop mainly for server, workstation and mainframes. We get to know that it can be used by the home client developer or student. That is main, and Unix is mainly used by workstation, server and mainframes. The source is accessible to the general public. The source is not accessible to the general public. That are the major points that we have to remember in our interview rounds and many more rounds, and it is very useful information. We have to very much aware about this. Now interesting facts are, Linux is the only kernel that is not a full system that is used. Initially Linux was compiled using GNU C compiler. More than 90% of current Linux source code is composed by other developers. Linux is used by every major space program. 9 out of 10 public clouds run on Linux. So difference between Ubuntu and Kali Linux. So Ubuntu developed by Canonical and Kali Linux developed by Offensive Security. Ubuntu was initially released on 20th October 2004. Kali was initially released on 13th March 2013. Ubuntu was used for daily use on server. Kali is used by security researcher or ethical hacker for security purpose. Latest version is this as we can see on the screen. And latest Ubuntu consists of a genome environment default. Through it allows you to change the same. Latest Kali consists of XFCE environment by default. Through it allows you to change the same. Ubuntu does not come packed with a hacking and penetration testing tool. Kali come with a hacking and penetration tool. So basically Kali is that very much useful for hacking, that is ethical hacking, and comes with a user friendly interface, that is come with a less user friendly interface compared to Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a good option for beginners to Linux. Kali Linux is a good option for those who are intermediate in Linux. Latest Ubuntu Live has a lot of default username as root. Latest Kali has a default username as Kali. Latest Ubuntu Live has a default password as blank. Latest Kali Linux has a default password as Kali. So we get to know that the password and the username, that is root, is same as Kali in Kali Linux, and in case of Ubuntu Live that is different and default. So now the difference between Arch Linux and Kali Linux. So that is developed by Levante Polak and developed by Offensive Security. Arch was initially released in March 2002. Kali was initially released in March 2013. The discussion forum for Arch is BB. So that is not that much important. If you want to in deep, so you can visit that forms. And penetration on environment by default. Through it allows you to change the name. Latest Kali consists of XFCE environment by default. Through it allows you to change the same. Arch doesn't come packed with the hacking and penetration testing. As we can see, Kali come with packed and hacking penetration tools. Arch come with a user friendly interface. Kali come with a less user friendly interface compared to Arch Linux. So Arch Linux is a good option for beginners to Linux. Kali Linux is a good option for those who are intermediate in Linux. Thank you guys.
So thanks for watching. Please support our channel, join and follow us.